Hi everyone, welcome to the Sunday Social. We've got a full cast today and it should be quite an interesting show. I'd be surprised if we don't go perhaps a little over the hour. But anyway, well, should we kick it off with a wristwatch check? So TJ, I'll start with you because you're in the far corner. What are you,
okay.
What are you wearing?
I'll take it off the wrist just to make it easier, but it's the Grail. It should be no surprise. The IWC, long name, Mark 18, tribute to Mark 11, one of the longest names in watch history. But I put it on the standard Mark 18 bracelet that it doesn't come with, and I think it's awesome as a combo. I love Fotina, and maybe we'll talk about that, but to me, the cream color is fantastic. And yeah, it's my Grail, and I haven't fallen out of love with it, and I've been wearing it for over a year. So it's proof that you can eventually find satisfaction in the watch world.
That's a whole series in itself. That's a live stream.
Fair.
The outlier.
Yeah. Dave, what are you wearing?
I am wearing, well, just off my wrist, a prototype Haraj titanium tourbillon Lensman 1.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
So we can get it to focus. There we go. Well, not really.
That's the one with the Cyclops under the glass. Is it under the glass?
It is kind of integrated into the glass, yes. You can
Okay.
adjust it.
Wow.
There you go.
There you go.
Awesome. Chris, what are you wearing?
What are they charging for that? The tourbillon? That's at a pretty good price, right?
So it is just shy of 9,000 Swiss francs, 8,890, but that's including all taxes, all duties to anywhere in the world, and all shipping, yada, yada, yada. So give or take 9,000 Swiss for a grade 5 titanium in-house hand-wind 120-hour titanium caged tourbillon. It's all right.
It's inspired by cameras or lenses or something like that. I remember reading it somewhere.
Yes, the Lensman one's got a kind of like that whole link up. There's a globally famous photographer called Brian Griffin, who has won like some of the best prizes in photography. So he's kind of involved with it. So yeah, you can't really see it in the camera, but round the edge of the bezel here, it's got kind of like lens, focal aperture type engravings and stuff on it as well. So it's very subtle, the nods to photography. If you're not a photographer, you wouldn't necessarily go, that's a watch, that's a photo watch. But yeah, it's got that kind of background to it.
Actually, Dave, if nobody's heard that episode of the Scottish Watches, do you want to explain a bit about your linkage with Haraj at the moment?
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I started with them as the business development individual. We'll call it that because they're not big on titles. It's like there's 4 of us now. So there's Andy and Sue who own it. There's Landon and there's myself. And then aside from that, there's the watchmakers, the engineers, the designers and such like. So that's what I'm doing now. So much for retirement.
That's great. Congratulations,
Very
Dave.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Never retired. You get bored real fast. That's all I'm going to say.
But
I'm
we
gonna
are going to call you Catlin from now on.
I'm gonna have to start putting the contains product placements.
Oh no, believe me, I'll say this. Like, I'm no fan of tourbillons. I'm
I
wearing.
think we're going to talk about that today, right?
Oh,
Yeah, that will come into it at some point. Yeah, on the basis that I'm wearing this and I work for this lot, there's many things that maybe aren't quite my cup of tea. Shall we go with? We'll go with that.
What about the Super Seed? The Super Seed.
That, on the other hand, that's a me kind of watch.
I really want to. I think it was Landon. I've been speaking to him back and forth. I definitely want to get one, and it's just a lot of watch. You get a lot of watch for that for what they're charging. Micro rotor, the GMT, everything. It's micro adjust the whole thing. It's just a beautiful watch. Congratulations! It's awesome. I'm jealous.
Yeah, to be honest, as much as it'll sound like hyping it, like anyone that listens to the podcast know we've talked about them for years, and as a brand, they're doing things right. Which is, I always said that there's very, very, very few watch brands I'd ever want to work for many reasons, but they're approaching things differently. I come from a cycling background, and the guys that are in that business come from a cycling background. They're not watch background people, so it's quite interesting to see how things are done a little differently.
Yeah, cool. Chris, what are you wearing? You're up next.
I have on. I'll take it off because it's going to be hard. I have an IWC as well. This is an IWC Ingenieur perpetual calendar flyback chronograph with digital display for the for the perpetual calendar.
Nice.
Cool.
That's a cool watch.
It's grade 5 titanium, ceramic, automatic, 120 meters of water resistance, and 70-hour power reserve for the movement. It was the second. I think it's the second most complicated movement that IWC made the year that it came out with.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Mark, you're up next. What are you wearing?
So I have a Christopher Ward C63 Sealander Elite. This is the titanium version with the pop-in, pop-out crown. Probably the nicest iteration of the light catcher case because of the darker color. And it's a very slim watch. Wears a little bit smaller than its 41 mil because the actual dial is kind of small. But it's lightweight, it's very comfortable. You know, probably for me, the nicest version of the Sealander.
Yeah.
We're 3-1 up in titanium v steel so far.
Todd, what are you wearing?
I've got a quirky piece on that I got from my watchmaker. He sold it to me at cost. It's the Bulova the Actron. So they've done it with using the precisionist movement as opposed to the crazy Accutron movement that was original. But it's a cool little piece, asymmetrical case, and fun piece. I don't wear it very much.
Yeah, really cool. Okay, and then I'll.
They've got a nice couple of little releases coming soon.
Yeah,
the astronaut. That's a cool looking watch.
That one's very cool. Like, actually, it's one of those brands that when I was growing up, it was like a special boutique-y brand, and I like to see them kind of coming back. Doing some things. I wish, for the most part, that they would just make more manageable case sizes. Like their cases are ginormous as a line, but to find one that's a reasonable size is nice.
Awesome. And then I'll go last. I am wearing the GMT, the new Seiko Sumo GMT. I just reviewed it on the channel. The QC is a little off. Also, this is a Crafter Blue strap, but the Crafter Blue strap doesn't actually fit it, so don't buy this. I had to attack it with a Dremel, which is never a good idea.
I was going to say, exactly how much cussing was happening while you were trying to install that strap?
It was a lot. It's just even though it's a Sumo case, it's a slightly different. It's a Seiko thing, isn't it? They're like, oh, we'll make a Sumo case, but we're going to make the tolerances a little bit different, so it's a little bit too shallow. So.
And Seiko have been doing misaligned bezels for so long. You actually think that is their standard?
Signature move.
Let's get straight into the popular opinions.
It's a real Seiko.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We know it's not a fake one because it's misaligned.
It's wonky right from the start.
Exactly. Okay, well, there's a lot to go through here. This week's show is going to be all about unpopular watch opinions. I'll be amazed if we stick to the hour. We have got about 12 to 13 to go through. So we'll read them out. Let us know in the comment section if you've got any. And this might become a part 2 at some point. But let's just dive straight in. So Pete from Pete McConville channel, he can't be with us, but he was actually a source of a lot of these, and I think a lot of us agree with you. So I'm just going to go through them in sequence, and then we'll so the first one that we had, unpopular watch opinion.
It's so shocking that Pete would have polarizing opinions.
We're very surprised by this.
Pete, the man who pulls the pin, the grenade, drops it, and wanders off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Right.
Pete, who is such a good friend to the show, but finds my reviews so derivative that he unsubscribed. Anyway,
publicly unsubscribed. Publicly
and they made a video about it.
And then announced it in the WhatsApp group. How generous of him!
Exactly. Anyway, so first up from Pete is: timeless and versatile are fancy words for boring. So this is his unpopular watch opinion. Does anyone want to tackle this one?
This is the beginning of any sales pitch from any new micro brand that's doing a Kickstarter, right there.
And cut out the middleman. You could add that too, right?
Disrupting
the industry.
Definitely overused.
I mean, I don't know whether that's overly controversial. I think it's just factual, is it not?
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, it's
Timeless is definitely lazy. We may have copied something that maybe someone did that became real popular and sold real well, so we're just going to rip it off. That's more what timeless means. Versatile.
I think these are adjectives. I think adjectives with, and I think I've spoken about this with a few friends of mine. When I post a picture on Instagram, or you're looking at comments on Instagram, people always call a watch stunning. So I just don't get there are a lot of, you can say a lot about a watch, but stunning. I don't know. I've never found myself stunned.
I've probably made stunning comments to your photos before.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is the best word that I found for the effect that they have on me is when I look at it, it's just like, it's beautiful. It's just like, wow, and it's whether you've been inside of a medieval cathedral and seen frescoes or whatever, it's the same reaction for me. The beauty of it is, it's just so brilliantly designed that it's overwhelming. And that, I don't know, to me, I do have that reaction, and I'm not using it in like people use literally all the time. It's not like that. I really mean that it's stunning.
I mean, sort of, I'm going to start using stunning as if I've been tasered.
Stunning.
Yeah. Stunning should only be associated with the general price of most watches.
Well,
That's
yeah.
true.
Prices definitely can be stunning. That I agree with. But I'm just saying adjectives in general that people use sometimes are a little over the top. I think people go a little over the top, timeless, and things like, there's, I think there are watches that deserve these adjectives and acclimates, but there are some that just, whatever.
I mean, if you've only got one watch, it's versatile by definition because you're wearing it all the time.
True.
That's an excellent point. So, I don't know, should we rate these, or should we say whether we agree with them or not? I don't know whether. So, do we agree with this one? No, we sounds like we don't, do we?
No,
Yeah,
I think we do.
We do
I
slightly,
think I do.
Okay. So,
Whether it's unpopular is whether you can, is that self-evident or unpopular? For me, it's self-evident. But then I'm not selling a Kickstarter I'm not selling a watch on Kickstarter. So.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna go in with one of mine now, and we'll see how. So mine is no watch should be without the date.
Have a look at yourself. It's out.
I'm going to die on this hill. I think that the date is such an important complication. Every watch should have it. It's a multifunction that has to be on a watch. I think it looks boring and sterile without a date. I'm throwing it out there.
See, the date sometimes throws off the symmetry. I don't know how you can say it's boring. Sometimes a watch is perfection without the date.
You mean timeless?
and versatile. Less versatile.
We could roll point 1 and point 2 together with this on the basis that Chapek have just released a new titanium version of the Antarctique, and they've deleted the date and put the price up by $15,000. So, I mean, that's stunning, and it's not got a date in it.
Sam,
Yeah.
I used to be very pro date, and that's why I didn't buy a Speedmaster originally. And since I wear my Grail all the time, I'm happy that it has the date. But if I were to buy, and I just did buy another automatic just to be like a beater, and I insisted that it didn't have the date because I don't want to pick out. Well played, Jack.
That's a great comment.
But I don't like fiddling with it with a watch that I don't wear all the time. That's why it's a liability for a watch that's only on the wrist sometimes.
It's a real liability if you have an Omega where you've got to get a pin to put the little pusher in to change the date. That's a liability.
I'll give you this, Sam. If it's a watch that you wear every day, all the time, the date's great. But if it's in your rotation, for me, the dates, now I have to manipulate my watch more than just set the time and go when I pull it out of the watch box. And I feel like the more I'm pulling out that stem and jamming things around, it's more wear and tear on the watch. So I like a watch without a date because I can just pick it up, set it, go.
I mean, if I look at my collection, you'd probably say 75% of the watches have a date, but I'm more than happy if I really like a watch and it doesn't have a date. I'd accept it. So I don't think it's a guideline, but it's not a rule.
Yeah, I can't. I will not buy a watch without the date. I'm
mean-
going to die. I'm going to die on this hill.
Other than if I've ever looked at a watch that say some form of calendar, whether it's a perp calendar or annual calendar, whatever. Outside of that, where there's an expectation for some date to be on it, by virtue of that's what you're purchasing, I've never ever bought a watch thinking it has to or doesn't have to have a date. But I've bought watches where the date implementation's crap. I've not bought watches where the date implementation's crap.
Yeah, this is one of the skills to the date. It also shows off how good the design is, because you can absolutely implement a date in a horrible place, or it
4 o'clock, 4:30.
Contrasting colors and
On the dial anywhere.
All right. Well, it looks like I'm getting
well
no
played.
support for this. I'm getting no support for this one. But well, first of all, we just got a super chat in. Thank you, Watches with Dennis. Very grateful for the super chat there. Very much appreciated. Okay, next up there was the next one up. Actually, is one of yours. Watch, Chris. What do you want to read this one out?
You shouldn't service watches unless they break. So I have a lot of watches in my collection, and I never service any of my watches unless something is going wrong with them, where it's maybe not telling time as accurately as it did, or it just stops working or something like that. If the date breaks, I don't use the date anyway, so that's not a big deal. But sorry. But yeah, that's just something that I've always sort of I've always stood by, and I don't do that. I've serviced very few watches in the almost 30 years that I've been collecting, and I never service my watches. That's it. Just I wait until they break. If they break, then I'll service it.
I'm actually the same.
Yeah. My manual from my IWC said not to service it unless there's an issue. So that's officially is now in the writing of, so I thought that was pretty amazing to actually see it there rather than just, in the community.
I think there's a validity to that to a certain extent. Like with most of us and most of the folk in the comments, I'm guessing they've got a lot more than one watch. Therefore, it's far from a necessity. I think like anything, it's a bit like if you collect cars, you don't need to necessarily do anything until it needs doing. But if you rely on it day to day, you should probably get it serviced. If you're a diver and you're using the watch genuinely for diving, I'd strongly suggest don't wait till it breaks, because if it breaks when you're halfway down 200 feet, you've probably got a big issue on your hands. I guess it's all relative. If you just collect watches and they are for fun, wait till it breaks.
Yeah, if your life depends on it, if you're a pilot or if you're a diver or someone who's actually using it as a tool, then yes, service your watches, make sure they're working on a regular basis, because it's like a race car in that manner, because if you don't change the oil, you don't change the tires, you don't have regular scheduled maintenance with you could be using it in extreme conditions and it could fail, and that would be very bad.
Well, those folks are using quartz watches though.
Right.
Still need to service a quartz watch.
Yeah, just put in a new battery.
Or
check your gaskets and whatever else.
Yeah.
So I think we're mostly agreeing with this one, aren't we? I think we're mostly agreeing. Let's see if anybody's got any. Yes, so JJ's saying, I agree with Chris. I waited 37 years to service my date. Just that might be a little bit over. Although I had a 12-year-old Speedmaster that I didn't service till it needed it. Awesome. Okay. So we're mostly agreeing with that one, I think. Next one up this is one of yours, TJ. Go on.
No. Yeah. So I watched all the, you need to own one of these. And for me, I just don't, I actually have a couple of dress watches, but never wear them. I've gone to a few formals and tuxedo level stuff, and I just wear my IWC and no one seems to care. So, I like tool watches, and so if I wear like something with like gold leather strappy, petite, the way a tuxedo watch ought to look, to me, I don't like it, and I'd rather wear something that emotionally connects me to something I love. So I just don't dress up in a dress watch. My wife doesn't care, and my friends don't care, and the people I'm trying to impress don't care. And so I just don't think it's my brother just bought himself his first watch. He just got into it. He got a CWC. I'm sorry, Christopher Ward GMT. It's toolish. It looks cool. And he's like, next I got to get a dress watch. And that's what made me think about that. It's like, no, you don't. Of course, he wants to because he's new and do this and is eager. And I'm trying to slow him down a little. But anyway, I think the point stands. I really don't feel like that's something I need to have. And I think fashion today supports that.
Yes. We could be more controversial. We could just drop the word dress, and then we would have all out.
No, don't do that. No.
Yeah, I totally 100% disagree.
Excellent.
You think people do need a dress watch?
Well, it just depends on how you approach things. When I get dressed up, I'm getting dressed up head to toe. And I know it doesn't show because I wear flannel like every week when we're on the show. But when I want to put on a suit and I'm going to put on some polished shoes and the proper matching socks and a nice tie, the dress watch just completes the outfit. It's just part of the overall ensemble. It's just how I like it.
Yeah.
Well, where's your threshold? Like what like would a Rolex sub not be good enough for that? Where do you cut it off?
I would
NATO
see
strap?
for that. I would wear Sam's watch, the Rolex Datejust. That's
Okay.
the sub. You could
sporting.
wear it if you're James Bond. I'm not James Bond. I want to look dressed up head to toe.
I mean, I know people who would, definitely fight you to the death on this one, TJ. But they're the kind of guys who wear a shirt every day, and they wear a shirt so tight to their wrists their hands are blue. So I just don't do that. If you don't dress like that, if it's not part of your work attire, or even if it is, buy a shirt with a bigger cuff. You don't need a dress watch.
See, like
it's that simple.
Do you wear flip-flops when you go out to dinner? No, you wear some nice shoes, you cover your toes, your nasty feet, no one needs to see them. Same thing, you wear a nice watch. I've worn jeans and a t-shirt to the Royal Opera House. You're not convincing me on this one. No.
To me, the dress watch is the fedora, right? We don't wear fedoras and overcoats when we go out, and gloves.
Be very careful here. Very careful.
And canes, and tails.
Oh dear.
What did you just say?
Well, what does the panel think? Is this? Are we agreeing with this one or not? I agree. I don't think we need one.
I think societally now, you're right. There's not the same kind of opinions laid on people when you don't necessarily conform to code, shall we call it? Whereas previously, code was code, but nowadays you can get away with murder with, how many folk do you go to and you see them wearing a suit and sneakers? That's not that uncommon these days.
Okay. Yeah.
Secret confession, I do want a Datejust or something like it.
And that's not a dress watch. Datejust is a sports watch.
Okay, I want a watch that's...
Is that how you're justifying it, Sam? Is that how you justify that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on now. So let's go for. Well, this is a three-parter because three people had a different take on this one when I asked the question. So it's mine was quartz is better for chronographs if you need to use it as a chronograph, and then Pete's was tool watches must be quartz, and then Chris, yours was you should love quartz.
You missed the last half of Pete's statement, which actually
yes, I know.
Which was a bit
all
provocative.
mechanical watches and jewelry. I think that's one in its own right.
Yeah. I do love a quartz chronograph. I will tell you that. I have mechanical chronographs. I don't have the money for a Daytona, so the ones I have are Valjoux 750s, and they're giant and they're heavy and top heavy. The quartz ones, they're great, very comfortable.
Sam, I like yours because I don't think necessarily must be, but I think it's a strong vote. Like you'd have to convince me otherwise because they're so much more accurate and anti-magnetic and shock resistant that if you're saying I want to make the best tool watch I can, but make it mechanical because I want to appeal to the classics, that's okay. But it just says a lot about your intent, what movement you choose, and I think the natural choice is quartz.
And the other thing is, if you're using them as a tool, you're actually timing something with a chronograph. If you only need a 1 second time, it can be mechanical. If you're desperate for that 100th, 10th, 100th, 1000th of a second, why are you wearing a watch? You're using a proper timing device.
It's true. Well, what's
Yeah.
the speed to which you can actuate the button? If you're accurate, if you can't react in that speed, then you can't measure that speed.
I think realistically, if you're using a tool watch as a tool and you don't have access to other more accurate tools, quartz is the answer, because it will be more accurate, more reliable, yada yada yada. But that's like saying dive watches shouldn't exist because 9.99 out of 10 love to float around a desk at some point, but that's about as far as they'll get near water. So
oh, that's coming.
I can guess that one.
Yeah,
I think,
Chris, what do you think on this? Sorry, Dave.
I was going to say, I think for chronographs, for me, from a technical perspective of what a watch company can do, especially if they go down the route of actually designing their own chronograph, whether it be a module to go on to an database or whatever, or their own in-house chronograph, that is one of the most difficult things that you can do, full stop. I mean, even tourbillons are simpler. Perpetual calendars are not that much more difficult. To get a chronograph off the ground is hard work.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, the other thing, and I don't know if this is going to come up, quartz is better for chronographs unless it's a VK64, which is a crime.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That's coming.
It's the abomination.
Yep.
But Sam, I think what I meant in mind was not necessarily you should love it, but don't hate it. Because I think for a lot of watch folks, quartz is an instant turnoff, and I think that's unfair. I think there's a lot of goodness in that segment of the market, and should be appreciated for what it is.
I mean, I'd still spend money on a Citizen with the washi paper dial, which is Eco Drive. It's quartz, but it's drop dead gorgeous as well.
Yeah.
Any final words on this watch, Chris? Anything under this one?
I'm a fan of quartz. I'll buy a quartz watch. Quartz chronographs obviously make sense. But I was going to say before that most divers don't use automatic watches for diving. They use a dive computer. Real divers are going to use a dive computer. Most of the divers that are automatic are desk divers. That's it's just. I think that the thing about a quartz movement is they're watches that you could just set and forget. And a lot of people, there's a lot that you have to go through with an automatic movement, make sure it's wound. You have to have it serviced once in a while if it stops working, and have it tuned up or whatever it is. I personally don't do that, but a lot of people do. The thing is that, they're also the entry level price to a quartz watch is lower usually, depending on the brand, of course, but I think they're great. And usually, again, most people, when they start out with watches, start with a quartz watch. They don't just jump into an automatic watch immediately. So they're not only reliable, but they're needed. I think that quartz watches are getting people into watches every day.
And if you've got a watch, if you have a son or a daughter who wants a watch, they're young, get them a quartz. They don't, they just enjoy the experience of the watch. You don't have to mess with it. And if they still want a watch in 10 years' time, then when they're 18, 21, graduate, then they get a proper watch.
They won't have an excuse when they're late because it's quartz. It's going to be reliable. So
good point.
Here's something controversial then. If it wasn't all these people that say, "Oh, quartz, I wouldn't buy quartz. Yeah, it's not a real watch." Blah blah blah. If it wasn't for quartz, I guarantee you, the watch industry, mechanical watches, wouldn't exist today. They would not.
My first luxury watch was a quartz chronograph. It was a Juan Mercier Formula S. It had mint green indices and hands. It was, I think it was PVD black. Excuse me. That was my first luxury watch. My first almost automatic watch was a Kinetic from Seiko. So really, my first 3 or 4 watches at least were quartz.
Yeah,
that's what got me.
The whole quartz crisis is what made the Swiss watch industry actually sit up and go, crap, we've been doing the same thing for hundreds of years and we are outdated, anarchic, we're of the past. And it made them completely revisit and completely reorganize themselves If it hadn't been for that, they just wouldn't exist. That we wouldn't be having this. This would be a null and void point. People would literally look and just go, "What? Why would you do that when you've got a phone or all the other ways you can do to tell the time more accurately?" That is the whole thing about it for me. So, if you like mechanical watches, you should probably have some quartz because it's properly part of the history of why it still exists.
Yep,
Yeah,
good point.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
funny
last,
to me too, because when I was younger, like to buy the quartz was the only option. And when you bought it, people were like, "Ooh, it's quartz." They were like, that was a cool thing to get the
Had
quartz
it on the
watch.
dial.
Yeah, it said it like proudly, and you would be like, "Yeah, it's quartz. This is pretty cool." So I mean, it's just funny how we've flipped.
And it was a lot more expensive. Quartz in the back in the day was a lot more expensive than a mechanical watch was.
Yeah,
It was, yeah. I've got my
True.
grandfather's Casio digital watch from the 70s, where that was like the future. Well,
Oh,
before
right.
we move on to this, we've got a few comments. So Whole Milk says mechanical chronograph movements are so pretty, though. That's true.
Agreed.
100%.
No one's gonna argue that.
And then Jack here says accuracy is a good excuse if you're too broke for a mechanical.
Potentially. Go on,
Yes.
Jack.
Well, you can always buy the Seagull 1963,
True.
which has got, yes, the movement's nearly 100 years old, but oh boy, is it beautiful.
Good looking. Yeah.
I think a lot of people go through. So there's, you start out collecting, and maybe you start with a couple of quartz watches, then you discover automatic watches, mechanical watches. You really get into that, and then for some reason or another, and I'm guilty of this. At some point, you're like, I don't want a quartz. That's quartz. Oh, that's an awesome watch. What is it? Oh, it's quartz. I don't want it. And then eventually, after collecting for more and more time, and then you realize, wait a second, that's a great watch. Even though it's quartz, it's still a great watch. And being quartz makes it, a great watch. It's something that you go through. I think a lot of people do this with collecting. Rolex is one of them. Also, I always for myself. I started collecting. I didn't like Rolex. Then I, started liking Rolex, and then, I didn't like Rolex. Now I kind of want a Rolex. Then I didn't want a Rolex. So I go back and forth on it. But it's the same thing with quartz. I think it's just part of collecting, and you sort of evolve, and then maybe you end up liking it.
I totally
Great
agree with
point.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So next point here. This is another one from Pete, and it sort of ties into one of mine, which I'll do next. Mine's a bit more cheeky than this one, but his is manufacture is easy, design is hard. Look at the number of companies out there that are able to make great copies of other designs versus the number of great designs worth copying.
Sounds like both are tough.
You can tell that Pete is a quality engineer, not a process engineer. He only sees the output. He never sees the pain it takes to get you there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I spend half my professional life fixing manufacturing, so it ain't easy. Whether it's batch, part, process, continuous, the phrase shift happens because you can have a perfectly stable system for a year, and then it'll go to hell and you won't have a clue. And then, and I'm sure Pete's going to come in with this, the tolerances the watch guys are working to. Yeah, manufacturing is not easy.
If it were, then Pagani's would be just as high quality as Rolex's, but I think we did the 1 month watch test here, and it didn't play out well for the Paganis, did it?
No, I mean, I think manufacturing it's never easy. It's easy to a certain point. The minute you want to hit certain standards of manufacture, then the whole paradigm shifts. If you want to make watches that are into whatever it's COSC, METAS, any of these kind of broad 5-second rule certifications, you're in a whole world of pain when it comes to manufacture, full stop. And it's not we've worked it out, we can do it. It's the ongoing consistency that is real difficult. There's a good reason why we've all suffered it. Why can't we get watches that we want instantaneously? Take out the whole Rolex thing at the moment, but in general, because there is a massive shortage of capable supply chain to actually make these parts globally. There's very few folk can actually do it to the standard required. I don't disagree. Design is real difficult as well, because there's many technically good watches that look like something that fell out the back of a dog, but they're two different worlds. But then to get them both to work together is even more difficult, because sometimes you've got a design that's constrained by a movement, or vice versa, So I think they're both real bloody difficult at the end of the day.
And at the end of the day, you can almost manufacture anything if you only want to manufacture it once. Manufacturing things 1,000 times, 10,000 times, whilst you don't have a high reject rate. Manufacturing is not easy.
Coming up with an original design isn't easy either.
Nope.
But then executing an original
problem.
design.
It's a very, very different problem.
Yeah.
Also, the other big problem is coming up with a good design that you can actually manufacture is a whole different question as well. How many products do you see out there? You see the concept drawing of whether it's a car, a watch, or whatever, and you go, mighty fine. Then you see the real thing, and you're like, did someone take their glasses off and become real shit whilst actually manufacturing this? Because, they're two different things. Just because you can draw it doesn't mean you can make it.
I mean, I used to teach design for manufacture, and just sort of like the horrors it takes to get from concept to new product launched out of the door, particularly if you've got to do a new manufacturing process. No.
Okay. Next one up then this is one of mine, is a 12-hour or 24-hour bezel is more useful than dive bezel. On a dive watch, obviously. I think a 12-hour bezel is more useful than a dive timer bezel.
Yeah, but Sam, you can go to the VK64 and have it on a hand. You don't need it on the bezel.
Well, the VK64, we're
it's not
coming
adjustable,
to that one.
though. Yeah.
Anybody agree with me on that one? Or don't agree with me?
I'll take you on that one, Sam. I agree with you. I think they put that on the Marathon Navigator, and I find it super useful because you can use it for elapsed time, and you can use it for countdown. You can use it for all kinds of stuff. As long as if it has the little tick marks between the hours, that's super useful.
I agree that it is more useful, but I don't like the aesthetic as much. Because the 60, because you need to have each one of the markings. So if you have a 12-hour bezel, you have to have 1 through 12. Otherwise, it still is useful. I guess you could. I just feel as though a 60, it's just a little bit better aesthetically. That's all.
Yeah, it depends on your use case. I mean, it's apples and oranges. It's what are you using it for? If you're using it for a multi-time zone timing, that's great. But if you are actually, you're dedicating it for timing, then the timing's great. Like I grill steaks using my 60-minute timing bezel. Like that's, I use that all the time for exactly that purpose. But the 12-hour would be useless for me in that case. When I'm doing 2 or 3 minutes.
Is that right, Todd? So you don't use your phone to time cooking?
No, I actually use my dive watches. I know it's a goofy
dedication.
Thing. I enjoy it. It's fun. I like set it, and I'm like, okay, I know.
12-hour or 24-hour bezel.
If it had the ticks in between the hours, yes. Like TJ said, I haven't seen one like that. Usually they're just big plots of 1 through 12.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a historical reason why a dive bezel is a dive bezel. And if you wish to maintain the aesthetic and the pretense, then leave it.
Sorry, I was just saying.
Oh, yeah, that one's tough. That one's tougher for me because it doesn't have minute markings on it. So,
but I do love that watch.
Versatile.
But
versatile.
It's bi-directional, so I mean, it does work. I mean, I see what you're saying. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no! Actually, you had a great example there. That was okay. Well, I won't die on that hill quite yet. There's a few others that I perhaps will sacrifice myself for. Okay, so Chris, TJ, this is your one. Photina is awesome.
I love it. Here's the deal for me, right? Is I noticed that whenever I found watches that are stunning, one of the common things was that effect of like faded tritium in the cases that I saw. Like there was a series of CWCs and Speedmasters that had that from the 90s, I think, and it was just wow. And then I realized that's the common bond, and so Photina for me, they just said that color looks awesome on a black dial with white, and we're going to recreate it. and people are mad that like you've taken something that was created through natural aging and you've replicated it. I don't understand why they're so angry. The color is gorgeous, and we found a way to make it without waiting 30 years, and I think that's awesome, and I love it. And in fact, I just ordered like a JP Customs, that company. I asked the forum to help me with that, and I'm probably going to send it in to have them put Fotina on the crop, 3, 6, 9, 12 lines and on the hands. And I think it's going to look fantastic. And I'll share that if I do that project, but I freaking love it. And I will die on this hill.
Yeah. I can't do it.
I agree with you, because the other thing as well is all of these old watches that have developed that color are by virtue, to be straight, of having materials that didn't stand the test of time. It's as simple as that. Modern looms will not patina. They just won't. They're all UV stabilized. They're all so well made and so developed now that they will broadly retain the same color they have now for perpetuity at the end of the day. So if you want that effect, then your option is have it made synthetically. And I think as long as it's done sympathetically and it looks good and it matches in with everything else, I have no issue with it.
I think it's overused. It's used as a very lazy link to made-up heritage, or we have a copy of a watch that was made in 1953 because we can't say it's a Blancpain copy, we're going to put old loom color on it. It's a lazy design trick most often. I think that's what I object to, is the fact that it's used as a lazy design trick.
Yeah, I'll say it a little bit more harshly. To me, like, I understand.
How can you get harsher than that?
I understand radium at the time was a little bit dicey about how dangerous it was, but now we realize that it was probably the most toxic material that was used in watchmaking. To me, it's like celebrating smoking. It's like everybody knows smoking is like harmful. You wouldn't have like a watch with a load of like, Marlboro or cigarettes on the dial or something. It's like a celebration of something that was quite detrimental to the people that were in regular contact with it. So that's my.
Well, Sam, I have two counter arguments. A, we can call it old tritium if you like, because the tritium faded the same way. And B, let's not let those lives lost to radium go in vain, right? They died creating this color, and if we kill it, then they died for nothing.
I think there's a better way to celebrate the suffering than putting it on something for no real reason other than you can't design a proper watch.
Well, I agree. If it's a lazy trick, then so be it. But I think I trust the people who are using it are doing it because that look is awesome aesthetically. I know I love it, and so if I'm one of the customers that is pleased by that. And so if they're doing that for people like me deliberately and not lazily, then I guess I don't know. I can't assume.
Think there are cases where it works. Don't get me wrong, but it's used so often without a proper justification. That's when it becomes difficult. But there are cases where it works. I have a Christopher Ward, one of their world timers, that uses light brown or pale beige loom, and it actually works very well. But then you see a lot of other watches, they're trying to link back to something and using that as a emotional modifier, and it looks trite.
Yeah, I agree.
It's as a design thing. Sometimes it comes off so beautiful. Like I think about the Omega, the No Time to Die, and I think about the Black Bay that I have. That's the gilt version. If that had white plots on it, I think it would be gross looking. But having just that light cream color, it just makes everything look warmer and better together than it would have.
I've seen the Omega a lot of the Omega, the dive watch a lot. The Bond, and I have a cat that hairballs a lot. That loom is exactly the same color as my cat's hairball. So it's like I really can't take it.
Oh dear.
Oh come on.
Why not have? I mean, I get the point behind not liking the color itself, but I think that having only the option of having bright white loom is kind of boring, I guess. I don't know. I personally don't mind. Actually, I like that warm color, and there's different variations. I think that there are brands that go really far with it, and then there's brands who use a little bit. It's the old radium mixture or whatever it is. and a lot of brands use it on their, their re-releases, so they look like a vintage version that was, whatever. And I have a Seamaster 1957 limited edition re-release, which is the original 1957 re-release, and it has almost the exact same dial, and they actually patinaed the dial. But if you ever go out and try and find a 1957 Seamaster, usually there is first off, it's radium, and then also it's uneven. Whereas when they're applying old radium, it's always even, and it's always an even color. So no matter what, it doesn't look old. It still looks new. It's just not white. So it's like having a different color shirt on. In the way I look at it, at least, I think that in some cases you wear, a white shirt, maybe you wear a black shirt, a beige shirt, which is an old radium color. I don't know. It's just a different color. That's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah,
It's a Fotina shirt.
Yeah, Jack says here, Fotina is the pre-ripped jeans of the watch world.
I have a watch. I have a watch with radium in it, and I bought a Geiger counter, and I have a few watches with radium in it, but I have one watch that has a lot. It's a 50 fathom, so a lot of radium in it. I don't wear the watch because of the amount of radium in it. If I could, without hurting the value, if I could replace that radium with old radium, like modern lume, I would do it so that I could actually wear the watch and be comfortable. But I don't. I get what you're saying. I get what I get both sides of the argument, but I kind of like it, and I think it looks good, and you get that look, that warmer look against the black dial specifically for me, because I really like black dials. That warmer look just it does it for me.
Okay. All right. Next one up, and I'm bound to ruffle some feathers again. This is no watch should be DLC or PVD coated. I'm just not. I just cannot get my head around. I don't mind black ceramic, 100%, but I can't. That chipped look, and it happens so easily. I'm just not feeling it.
Okay. Even a clear DLC or like a what is it, Dia Shield or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I don't mind that. Actually, I have only had one watch with that on. I think it was it's a Seiko, isn't it? That has that Dia Shield. Yeah.
Super titanium from Citizen.
Yeah, it's the black or sort of darker coloured coatings that chip away that I'm not.
I think I get where you're coming from for this, because a premium watch can look real bad real fast if it's not done properly. But 9 times out of 10, this is also lazy manufacture, because brands are not utilizing these coatings properly. And if you're good with your metallurgy and you understand how these coatings work, you can make them broadly unscratchable. Diamond light coating, the kind of clues in the name, and that should be pretty if you can scratch it, you should be scratching your crystal at the same time. And as you all know, scratching a crystal, it's not impossible, but it's pretty bloody hard.
Yep.
And if a diamond light coating is done properly, it works. The general reason that they chip or they look like that is because they're annealing them onto steels that have been overly hardened before they're coated. And effectively, what happens is the coating is either harder or softer than the surface is applied to. So if you drop it, it flakes off. So if you do it properly, and there are some that are done properly, it's almost impossible to get it to come off.
But even if it does come off, if it scratches up, if it flakes off, if you have a vintage watch that's PVD coated, why is that a bad thing?
I think
like a vintage Porsche design chronograph. I have a Tag Heuer 510-501, which was PVD coated, and it's beat to hell. And the bracelets, every joint on the bracelet, there's cracks and there's splinters and there's parts that have come off. I think it looks cool, and I wear it. I think it looks. Yeah. It's like vintage radium. Again, you have this uneven, patina to it. Maybe it's even. It looks good, in my opinion. But if you're buying a brand new watch and it's not manufactured correctly, and you put your watch down on the desk and it scratches and it's a DLC coating, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I agree with you. But
I think the marketing is off with black watches. That like stealth and all this. Like the fighter pilot doesn't care that his watch can't be. It's a strange concept, right? And even if you're, I mean, I think the first black watches were designed by Porsche designed to mimic the non-reflective instruments of a car. And now there's this whole idea of stealth and, that you're trying to hide from the Taliban because your watch could be reflective, even though there's a nice glass on it. So I just think it's gotten a little out of hand. The stealth watches that have like the numbers are blackened too, so you can barely read them. It got to the point of ridiculousness. I think it's a cool aesthetic, but don't try to sell me that a military person can't have a stainless steel watch, because 99% of watches that have been worn in combat have been stainless steel watches over the history of mankind. So I just think that part's a little silly, but I think they look awesome, especially when they're ceramic, like some of the IWC ceramic pilot watches in black. They look amazing.
Yeah. If you want to see
Or
it done,
G-Shocks, mostly G-Shocks being worn by military.
Yeah, G-Shock and Timex Ironmans is pretty much what I grew up with. And now it's transitioned to Suunto and Garmin's with more features, but it's all the same stuff.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, last word on this one, and then we'll move on to the next one.
if you want, look at Zins, because they do black treatments on cases properly, because they've got the Tigemeted cases, and they'll even give you a tool and say, there you go, there's a case with black on it, see if you can mark it, and you'll be going some if you can mark it.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, next one up, Pete. Pete's one is the push for in-house movements has stifled industry creativity and made watches dull. Or all the most interesting watches are built on third-party movements.
No.
I've got one word that I'm going to say, and we can end this. Our work.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of in-house movements as far as I appreciate what they are, but I don't need to buy. I don't feel compelled to buy them. Like, it's not a criteria for me, but I respect what they are. And I think there's a lot of innovation going on there. But I have a Sellita and I love it. And I think it reflects what the watch industry used to be when you build a great watch and then you grab the great movement and you put them together. So the in-house movement thing is a little bit of it's a little bit of an out of control fad right now, but it'll come back to center. But it's important, and I think it's good for the industry. I have respect for it.
Your work, MB&F, they use base movements. But the modules...
In some of them they do, but the argument is that in-house movements or non-stock, off-the-shelf movements are stifling creativity is as far as
it's backwards.
Because it's the same scenario as using stock movements. In my argument, that stifles innovation because you're given a set. It's effectively like, go design a new jetliner or a new jet fighter. Oh, but by the way, you have to use this engine and you have to use these parts. You're kind of stuck by what you can do with those parts. If you've got a movement that's a given size, given power reserve, given X, Y, and Z, you're stuck with what you can do with it. There's a pretty close set of parameters as to what you can do. If you want to be smaller than any of those stock movements, good luck. If you want to come up with something creative, and I would class, yes, base movements, that, semi in-house, whatever you want to call it, but, Chaikin and MB&F and all of these guys, yes, base movement, because that's a way around the problem, but they are creative, and these shapes and sizes and functions wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that creativity.
I would argue that stock movements, base movement, blanks, or whatever you want to call them, the majority of watches in the world are using blanks, obviously, like the NH34, NH35, or whatever, and the Miyota 9000 series, the Eddas and Sellitas of the world. A majority of those watches are just clones of other watches, or they're just uncreative. I mean, there's tons of micro brands out there using they're not doing anything. You're getting great watches. They're the specs are great and all that stuff, but you're not getting anything creative.
No,
I agree. But there are brands that are using base movements that are doing creative things with those base movements, but they're almost unrecognizable by the time they're done with them. The cost to manufacture is a lot, but they're manufacturing modules that sit on top of these movements that are far and like the brands that you've just mentioned. But I don't think they stifle creativity at all. I think they
They drive
I
it.
think it's both sides of the coin. I mean, they could be in the right hands, create something amazing with them, and then in not the wrong hands, but people who are just making run of the mill watches. You make a run of the mill watch, you're going to use a run of the mill movement. And then there are brands that are using and creating their own movements from scratch. And that's, I think, it takes a lot more creativity to come up with the movement and then add complications to that and then, wrap it in a creative case. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
I've
Got a comment coming in here. So,
too. Like that brand is making an unbelievable watches and very creative. And it's all about the movement first.
yeah. Watch with Dennis says, I disagree with Pete on on the most interesting, but I do think a lot of people want in-house and honestly can't articulate why.
100%.
Well, look at Haraj. Haraj is a great example because they make their watches, they make their basically the entire watch in-house. They've actually sold their manufacturing to other brands like Bremont, and they make some great creative watches, and I don't think they're boring at all. I think they're pretty cool. I think that's kind of, like a mid-level brand that's, not incredibly expensive. They make affordable versions of really high-end complications, and they're giving you a lot for your money. And they're in-house. You're getting micro rotor movements and tourbillons and cool stuff. Like I think it's pretty exciting.
I think the in-house argument, there's absolutely pros and cons to it. It depends what you want. It depends what your position is. In-house can be very creative, and there's the big downside with what I would call legacy movements. So broadly speaking, ETA or Solita based movements. And actually they're one and the same thing. A Solita is a copy of an ETA at the end of the day. They are legacy designs. They have fundamental issues. Power reserves are not good. Power reserves are not, by modern standards, what people begin to expect now. And these guys have absolutely zero interest in updating them because they have been almost iteratively updated to the nth degree already. There's very little they can do to it now. They've got modern manufacturing. All of the things that have been done to it have been done to it. If they want to come up with 70, 80, 100-hour plus power reserves, silicon, yada, 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 it's a clean sheet exercise ultimately for them because you can't shoehorn those things into what exists. That's where in-house came from for a lot of brands. They said, we're not happy with the status quo. It's a bit like motor cars these days still having a derivation of the engine in the Model T Ford. That would be that would just be complete farce if that was the case. But that is what a lot of these watch movements and modern watches that people pay a lot of money for are. But there's also the narrative of brands that are saying, if we have an in-house movement and we restrict supply of this to only us, when you want it serviced, do you want it fixed, do you want it whatever, you're coming back to us. Yeah. So it closes that loop of control of a client. So from a commercial perspective, it makes sense for them, but it is also quite controlling from that narrative as well. Different brands approach it from a different angle. The best ones approach it from a view of we can actually do something good for the industry, because what is stifling the industry as a broad rule is manufacturers being lazy and relying on legacy products that they can buy cheaply and easily on the open market, a la Solita. That's the reality of it. And if the whole industry relied on that being the case, nothing exciting would happen.
I'm sure that, let's use Solita as an example. If enough of their customers said, we want a 28.8 frequency movement with an 80-hour power reserve, you could put the millions in to do it. But if the customers aren't demanding it, why would you?
Yeah, 100%. It's not to say there's anything wrong with those movements. It gives people a start in the industry. It gives small brands who don't have the capital, the wherewithal, the technical nonce, whatever it is, to actually come up with a new movement. Because let's not get things wrong here. If you want to do an in-house movement, you better have real deep pockets, and I'm talking in the millions. And you better have 5 to 10 years and a suite of really capable people to even come up with a working prototype, never mind something you can actually produce. That's the reality of it, and that would be sad because all these micro brands wouldn't exist because that wouldn't be realistic. So there's absolutely a place for it. Where I object to it being used is certain big, very rich commercial brands shoehorning movements into very expensive watches because it's very good for their bottom line. That's what I've got an issue with.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay, and next one up here then is, Chris, TJ, we had to put this one on because we both agree with this, and it's around the Citizen VK Mecha Quartz movements. And this is, go on, TJ, before I get too passionate about this one, you can give your view.
Yeah, so, and I'm when I talk about these, I'm comparing them to existing quartz, like the Ronda 5031D, which is a Bicompax 30-minute chronograph. And the problem with the VKs is a couple. The 64 that has its Bicompax doesn't have running seconds, so you just gave that up. Your battery life is shorter, and you've got a useless 24-hour repeater that's not independently adjustable for a second time zone. And the worst part of it that's not often talked about is the 60-minute register for elapsed time is so tiny that you can't read it. You certainly can't read it on the fly, like in an aircraft under G-force or whatever. And then the 5031 has all those things fixed, but it doesn't have the sweep. So microbrands keep using the VK because it gives that illusion of a mechanical watch, even though it's not one, because people like how that second hand sweeps. And I had one for a little bit, and I did like that, but I gave up too much, and I couldn't read the elapsed time. And that's my biggest pet peeve in watches is when a chronograph's not legible, because it's supposed to measure elapsed time.
Yeah, I totally agree.
If you look at the swatch moon swatches, they only have like every 5 minutes marked on their chronograph registers, so you couldn't even tell if it's 3 or 4. I mean, you could infer, right? But it's difficult. And so I just think the 5031 movement, it does it so much better that I just can't understand a company making that conscious choice. No, we're going to go with this one. They just don't care about the function. They just care about what it looks like.
Yeah, it's constantly in being a mechanical chronograph. I don't like the sweep of the second hand. The trade-off for a completely useless 24-hour dial that can't be independently changed. Like, okay, we know it's 8 in the morning because it's light outside, or it's 8 at night, it's dark. Like, you don't need a 24-hour indicator on a watch. If you could change it to a second time zone, you're talking something completely different. But I don't know why whoever thought that. Even make it a little dot instead of an actual dial to indicate the 24-hour dial as a separate complication. But yeah, I've got watches with the VK63, I think, with the running seconds on my speed time. I'd just about get away with that. But with the VK64, where the watch is completely dead, unless you're watching the minute hand move and you've got a useless 24-hour indicator, I just can't get around it. I can't get behind it.
I'd say the VK64 is a particular crime,
yeah.
But there's not, the other ones, the 3 subdial one, I don't think you should hate all of them. You should reserve your hate in particular for the VK64.
That I do. Yeah, I've got the three.
Well, I would hate all of them just because if you were timing something and I asked you to, stop, and then say, tell me what time you measured, you wouldn't be able to do it.
If you were asking me to time something like that, I'd use a G-Shock anyway.
Right. If you're buying an analog chronograph that you can't read the elapsed time, then just buy a 3-hander. And so that just puts me in the sense of this company's deliberately choosing to make an elapsed time measuring device that can't really measure elapsed time. It can measure it, but you can't decipher it. And so it's a tough decision. I mean, I guess you could blow up the 60-minute register and make it easier to read, and then you'd probably be okay. But the tiny ones, even with glasses, you just look at it like, I don't know if that's an 8 or a 7, and that's a problem. That's 60 seconds off. And then you're marketing it as an aviator watch. What aviator can afford to be a minute off, or can afford to spend that much time trying to see is that 7 or the 8? I can't tell. Like, it's awful, and I'm full of.
Why did the pilot crash into the ground? Because he was trying to use elapsed time on a VK64. I'm sure there's an air incident report like that somewhere.
I'm sure the PSB has that watch flagged already.
Yeah, it's purely an aesthetic choice. That's why, because they're not. A majority of the people who are buying these watches aren't using it for timing anything.
Yeah,
right.
They're making the purchase based on the looks of the watch. And
I didn't buy that Stratton I flashed up that's got a VK64 because it's got a VK64. I bought it because it's golf colors.
Which is a great choice. You make a very good choice. on the color scheme. But I guess it comes down to if the company is just trying to make an aesthetic, that's totally fine. I respect that. Most bike brands often do. But if you're going to say, we made this pilot instrument, and you're going to start making your marketing about making a precision instrument, don't choose that movement, because you're betraying your own intent by the movement you choose.
That could be part of the marketing too. 99% of the time, the marketing is that it's a precision instrument, and 90% of the people who are buying it don't even pay attention to that marketing. They are only looking at the watch. They hear the marketing. They think it's cool. They make the purchase. That's kind of how it's the same thing as a desk diver. People, you could have, 500 meters of water resistance, but you've gone swimming in your pool a couple of times with it on by accident, and usually you take it off and put it in. That's just 99% of the people who are buying them. And like I said, most of the people who are actually flying professionally aren't relying on their watch, and most of the people who are diving professionally aren't relying on their watch. They're using computers for stuff. True,
but I'll counter that with this. If you saw marketing for a dive watch that had 25 meters of water resistance, you would say that's BS. And that's my point with chronographs that can't be read. It's the same thing. Like we're in that 5% of people, which is, I'm being nice, it's probably less than that actually care about the details. But if you care about the details, I'm just saying, as enthusiasts who care and are critical and pay attention, I think it's disingenuous to do marketing and then to defeat your own marketing with a choice where you could have easily made a much better choice, and to basically say, you know what, I don't care. Just put in the VK.
You've just summed up most marketing departments. Here's the facts of the matter. Thanks very much. We don't actually care. Here's the story.
Yeah.
Long live the Boulevard Lunar pilot.
You're saying the 5% who care. It's literally maybe 50% of those people actually will care. 50% of those people maybe use it in a professional environment.
Yeah, that's
right.
Fair.
I would say even less than that.
Yeah. But a lot of these things, you like the illusion that they could do the thing if you had to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. Well, we've got a few more, but I think we should do a part 2. But I'm gonna end on. I'll just end on one because we're a bit over time here. But this is one of my last ones. Is no one does titanium better than Citizen, no matter how much money you spend on a watch that is titanium. I'm gonna die on that hill.
What about grade 5 titanium?
So,
what about grade 2? Grade 2 is more machinable.
The entire watch industry is use of titanium. Titanium's the watch industry's new toy. Okay, a few brands have used it for quite a long time. If you've ever had to work with titanium in the real sense of titanium and not just fancy watch cases, it's all bluff and it's all bluster. It's like, we use type 5, we use type 2. It's like if you buy anything from titanium and they claim that the whole thing's made out of one grade of titanium, they've got no idea what they're doing with titanium and shouldn't be trusted with it in the first place, because there's lots of, cases are different to pushers, to crowns, to different parts. They all should have different things. So the watch industry is just playing at the general naivety of the average buying public that titanium's, it's like titanium and carbon fiber, and folk go, expensive, I'll buy that, please. Yeah. The reality is, Citizen do it well. They've actually done it for pretty much in the watch industry longer than anybody else. And with them being Japanese, they tend to, as a culture, when they do something, they do it as well as they can. So they are using it, I think, relatively genuinely. But they don't overly shout about it. They just say it's titanium. They don't give you all the BS that other countries might give you with it. And I think they do it very well. You can buy very inexpensive watches made out of titanium from Citizen that are really well made. So I probably agree with you.
But what about, so are you specifically, because I'm
talking about the Duratech or something, I forget their brand name.
Super Titanium. Super Titanium has a DLC coating.
That might be it.
So they make grade 2 titanium. So they make a regular run-of-the-mill grade 2 titanium, which if you wear grade 2 titanium, if you've ever owned a titanium watch that is just plain grade 2 titanium, it will scratch, and it will scratch pretty often. It's very light, and that's just the way it is. It won't take a polish, right? Then you have super titanium. Super titanium is grade 2 titanium with a DLC coating, and it's similar to what Seiko do with DiaShield. It works really well, but eventually it will scratch because the DLC coating will eventually wear off or scratch as well, and then you will see those scratches on top of your titanium. Then there's grade 5 titanium, which Citizen really don't use. As far as I know, I believe they don't, unless they are using it in their more higher end watches. I'm not familiar with any grade 5 titanium Citizen watches, unless, like I said, they're their series, their 001 or whatever the hell that is, that higher end watch.
Well, there's no real reason why grade 5 titanium, if it's a cost basis, why grade 5 should be that much more, if any, more expensive on a dollar per weight basis.
In my experience, grade 5 titanium doesn't need a coating and it doesn't scratch.
It's a much harder material, but that also makes it much harder to work. So if you want to see a smooth case with transitions, you're not going to see a grade 5 unless you're going to someone like Blancpain with grade 23. And
this is a grade 5 titanium case. You have transitions here that are very, very crisp between polishing and
yes, but you can't do a smooth transition. You can do a sharp transition because that's much easier than a smooth one, machine wise.
Right. Yes. But grade 5 titanium in general is harder to work with. That's why it's more expensive, and you can put a polish on it, and that's why they charge more money for it. But Citizen, as far as I know, don't use grade 5 titanium. Maybe I'm wrong, Sam. I don't know.
I mean, I was more type that out for clickbait than actual factual.
I love super titanium. I have this ProMaster with super titanium. I think super titanium is awesome, and the its wearability, that it doesn't scratch very, very easy like titanium does. The titanium, I mean, I have a Christopher Ward Belcanto. The case is in grade 5 titanium. That has a beveled edge. There's polish on it. The bracelet, I wore it for a day. I looked at the clasp and there was scratches on it because
the bracelet's grade 2.
The
reason is that ultimately grade 2 titanium is commercially pure titanium.
Sure. Yep.
It's as near as damn it just titanium. Whereas grade 5 is an alloy. It's not pure titanium.
Aluminium and vanadium.
There's aluminum, right? There's aluminum.
It's
aluminium and vanadium, I think.
Yeah,
6-4.
grade 5 is 6Al4V, so it's 6% aluminium, 4% vanadium, and is significantly harder and tougher, and is designed primarily for things like turbine blades and things that need to be tougher. It's also much better for hardening as well. The Citizen treatment actually on the super titanium is not actually a coating on grade 2. It's a surface hardening treatment that they developed that does kind of anneal the surface of it and makes it tougher. So the proper super titanium is not a physical coating. It's an air hardening treatment that they give to it. There's then a coating put over it to protect the shiny surfaces, to keep them looking better for longer, because titanium, when you polish it to a mirror polish, even if it's on grade 5, will mark quite easily, because all titaniums have got a more ductile surface than steel, so you will get these little scratches. But grade 2 super titanium is a nice hybrid between easy to work grade 2 commercially pure, harder to work grade 5, but gives you like a kind of surface hardness that's similar to grade 5 without the additional cost. But it's all smoke and mirrors.
And the price is good. That, like I said, I have a ProMaster that has super titanium. I love it. I think it's a great watch. It's light. It looks good. I like the color of titanium. That's something that people don't often mention, but I like the color of titanium more than I like of stainless steel, because it's a little bit more gray, and I like that. So I get that. I like a bright stainless steel watch as well, but I like to have options, and that color of titanium is appealing to me.
Yep, I agree.
Absolutely. Well, that's been awesome. Thanks for everyone for in the comments. Any final words on any of it? We've still got some. Well, this is a two-parter for sure.
We need a part 2, Sam.
Yeah, we'll definitely.
The comments have been awesome. So I want to
Yeah.
echo that comment that we've got a lot of good contributions from folks via comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, big thanks to the panel. Thanks so much, Chris, for joining us this week. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone else, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you all.
Cheers,
Yeah,
y'all.
bye.
Again, thank you.
Right.